Hugh, is this some debate between reality and what happens on the ground, which governors know, and senators in Washington who are more part of something else?
On a more visceral level, Charlie, it's a debate over whether or not politicians keep their word. Mike Lee ran on repeal and replace. Shelley Moore Capito ran on repeal and replace. Lisa Murkowski ran on repeal and replace. Dean Heller ran on repeal and replace. I do not know how their brands survive. I do not know how their credibility survives not opening debate on a subject matter for which Republicans have been campaigning for 8 years. It would be a devastating blow, so much so that there is an effort, Senator Cornyn announced tonight, to fly Senator McCain back, to get clearance from his doctor to bring him back to open the debate. I really cannot believe they're considering not opening debate. You might vote against the final product, but not to open debate is a devastating takedown. Why believe anything a Republican senator says if they reverse themselves on this?
Well, can I just add one question here? What's the Republicans I'm talking to, Hugh, they really wonder, is there actually a political cost? Is there a real political cost for Republicans in 2018 to not pass this piece of legislation? Because privately, a lot of them say the Republican governors want the Medicaid expansion. The law's already taken root. Maybe you just let it fade away and focus on taxes because health care is a thorny issue.
On the day-to-day basis, I think Dean Heller loses his election unless it both passes and works, period. Jeff Flake, I don't think. But the real cost will come to the House of Representatives, and more importantly, at a much higher level, at 30,000 feet. Why believe anyone about anything? The damage to our government will be so profound if the Republican Party cannot deliver a debate on something that they've campaigned on for 8 years. I think it is almost stomach-churning that they would not vote to open debate on this.
And is it likely to happen, do you think?
I have no idea that they were trying to bring Senator McCain back, though. Charlie tells me they're very, very close, and perhaps Senator Lee woke up and decided, I've at least got to vote to open debate. Senator Moran in Kansas is another problem. They're not going to get Collins and Rand Paul, so they need John McCain and everybody else. It's that simple. That's the math.
Susan, how long can the White House live with this infighting among the 5 or 6 factions that are there?
Well, of course, there are White Houses that have had competing power centers in the past, and it's worked well in some cases because it generates ideas, it keeps things moving, it challenges assumptions. This has been, I think, pretty rough, though. I mean, in part because you don't have a president who is, as has been said before, really accustomed to the ways of Washington. They've made some blunders. And you now have the Republican Party generally sticking with him. You don't really see a lot of Republicans peeling off from Donald Trump. But I think there are questions being raised about how long they'll do that and how far they'll walk, what kind of plank they'd walk off for Donald Trump. One thing you do hear from Republicans on the Hill is they're not criticizing him on Russia. They're not criticizing him on some of the staff turmoil at the White House because they think there is a possibility of getting through a lot of things that have been big agenda items like a tax cut and you know, things beyond health care. But if they can't do that after winning the House and the Senate and the White House, that is a tough message to take into the midterms or certainly into a re-election campaign.
Do you believe that the Mueller investigation will figure out why Donald Trump has behaved as he has and said what he has said from during the campaign, continued right up until today about Russia and about... Go ahead, Susan.
I have huge faith in Robert Mueller, who is universally respected in town, maybe not at the White House, but everywhere else, as a dogged, serious, cautious investigator. So I think we're going to have a lot of questions answered through his inquiry.
And will it be, Hugh, in your judgment and looking at all the possible options, more likely to be a tie to some kind of financial arrangement, some kind of financial transaction?
I think some people are definitely going to find that this investigation leads to their indictment. I don't believe they're in the White House right now. I don't believe this administration will be defined by Russia. In the final analysis, I think Mr. Mueller is going to find that there isn't collusion. There's no evidence of it adduced thus far. There may have been some wrongdoing by individuals. The administration will be defined by what it does or fails to get done. And right now, the ice is thin. And when it breaks, it's going to break pretty damn dramatically unless they begin to deliver. And they do get about 14 months. You get the fall and you get the first quarter of 18. But after that, nothing happens. And you don't want to go into the midterms with your party staying at home angry and the other party marching in the streets. That's a recipe for a wave.
So Trump as president will be defined between now and right before the midterm elections, 6 months before the midterm elections.
Absent some extraordinary crisis abroad, yes.
And Hugh is absolutely right. I mean, we all spend enormous amounts of time talking about the Russia investigation. That dominates the headlines. But I do think when voters go to vote in 2018 in the congressional midterms, I agree 100%. I think what's going to happen there is going to be much more reflective of whether they've seen anything in Washington that was true to Donald Trump's promises.
That's the reason they were prepared to find him disruptive.
Well, and I, as an American, I'm really concerned because he tapped into a great deal of anger in this country, legitimate anger about the broken ways of Washington, about broken promises. What happens to that anger if after 2 years or 4 years of Donald Trump, Washington looks exactly the same? The sorts of priorities that we've been paralyzed about and that haven't advanced have not advanced any further. What happens to Americans' already shriveled faith in their government? This really concerns me not as a Democrat or Republican, but as an American.
We're seeing flickers of an emerging dynamic that I'm paying attention to ahead of 2018. It looks more and more like President Trump is preparing, if he wants to run against his own party, to blame congressional Republicans for the inaction rather than having it on his shoulders. And if this divide becomes a yawning divide, it's really going to define the next few years. Because inside the White House, there's a view, maybe wrong, maybe right, that Trump is fueled by grievance politics, by populism, by that anger that Frank mentioned, not necessarily by the accomplishments, and that an ideology or accomplishments are not going to determine whether Trump has success or not. It may determine whether the Republicans control Congress, but Trump is on a different path, a different track, and because of that, he may start actually running against his own party.
And he's going to run against us. I mean, one of the things that has been true from the beginning, and I think
he's running against press and Republicans.
He's going to run against all of us sitting here today. I mean, one of the reasons why I think he has waged such a war over what is a fact, what is truth, is because if you want in the long run to evade accountability, one way to do that is to say you can trust no source of information, no source of analysis except what I'm telling you. In his perfect world, we believe without question what he tells us, and we distrust all other sources. That's a big narrative in this administration.
Hugh, what bothers you most about this president?
That he is not spending his time focused on legislative agenda. I've mentioned judges before, on the blocking and tackling of governance. I don't mind tweet storms. I don't mind controversy or combativeness, but I do want results. And I do worry. Frank just mentioned this. It's rare for Frank and I to agree. It's not unprecedented, but it's rare.
We've agreed before.
The politics of grievance in the country don't cut R&D. They cut against, I believe, the front row and the back row analogy was used this week. The people who are sitting in the front seats versus the people who are sitting in the back seats. And the people who are sitting in the back seats are very, very angry. And if Donald Trump tries to tap into that in 2018 against everyone in coastal elites, Republican and Democrat, everyone who's got a fine health care plan, it could be terribly disruptive for the country. So I would like him to go back to governing more than anything else.
But does he know that? Does he know governing, or does he simply know the power of grievance politics?
There are good people in the administration. There are competent people around him that know governing very, very well, and I believe he listens to them at least sporadically and often in a long period of time, and it gets very productive. And I don't underestimate Leader McConnell or Paul Ryan or the Chairman Kevin Brady of Ways and Means or John Cornyn. There are lots of effective people. The president's attention, though, is often engaged by people who are punching at him, and he punches back, and he's never going to change that. That's not the problem. The problem is at least find some time for the agenda, not just the combat.
Well, it is the problem if everybody perceives that to be what your primary concern is, your primary focus is simply being so angry at people who attack you that you cannot resist joining that battle.
The 40% that is solid for him, they love that part. But getting to 50% and getting to 51% or getting to electoral college majority in 2020 will require the traditionalists, the conservatives, the Republicans, and that's the 10% he's missing out on.